I would rather for him to live than to start an argument and be shot.
Just pay attention and listen to what the officer says.
We live in a society where racism operates every day.
Hello and welcome to our third installment of Police and the People. Today the topic is the community response. In the aftermath of Ferguson, we've been having a series of roundtable discussions here on Channel 20 about how we can improve relations between the police and the public. Today's topic, what are the role of community groups in organizations? Groups, for instance, like the Neighborhood Square Watch. And we are joined today by Mr. Ron Johnson, who is the chair of that neighborhood group, which plays an active role in helping bridge that divide between the police and the public. Also, community organizations like the YWCA, which are actively out combating racism by fostering dialogue. And we are also joined here today by Tina Nixon, who is the president and CEO of the YWCA of Greater Harrisburg, and Amanda Arbor, who is the Racial Justice Program Coordinator. I'd like to start a little bit with exactly what has happened at the Y in terms of facilitating the conversation about race. We've talked a little bit about the conversation which you fostered, and maybe you could review that for our viewers at home. And maybe we'll start with Amanda.
Sure. So the YWCA launched our Let's Talk, a Conversation About Race program last February, which we were pleased to have members of your administration as well as David Botero from the City Police participate in. And we have held a number of other series since then, which is focused on having a small group of community leaders carrying a conversation together on what is race, what is racism, how does that impact us at individual, institutional, and systemic levels, and most importantly, what can we do to eliminate it, as the YWCA's mission states.
That's right, and I think Dave Botero, who was on the program when we were trying to get policing perspectives on this, has credited that conversation with really helping facilitate a dialogue and remove the taboo of discussing race, which can sometimes be very difficult and challenging to do. Tina, is that what you see as the primary goal of such a conversation?
Absolutely. I think it's important as the YWCA and our mission and core to our mission is get people talking. Fear is brought about when people don't understand, when they don't understand where other folks are coming from. So it's important that we are able to sit in a safe environment and have those conversations and really kind of move forward with the charge of understanding and working together to prevent any hate crimes or, any type of violence that is taking place in our community. So we will continue to have Let's Talk series. As a matter of fact, we have one coming up next week, which we'll start with community leaders again. Amanda hosted or facilitated one at the LGBT Center, which was very successful. So our goal is to engage as many individuals in our community in the conversation.
Yeah. It was very clear we were speaking to the police and when we were speaking to members of the public about the divide that existed in Harrisburg, that they both believed the key was having an understanding of what it's like in the other person's shoes. And facilitating that conversation before the point of confrontation is really the only way to do that, because once there's already a confrontation point, it's really too late for dialogue. Would you talk a little bit about that, Tina?
I think it's important that not only neighbors, but police officers, that we understand and know our neighbors and know who they are. And I'm going to say back in the day when I was growing up, the police officers, they did walk the beat. We knew, who they were, and they knew us and our families. And I think when things are very heightened and, if you know someone, you're going to respond differently. You're, as opposed to you maybe pulling out your gun, maybe you're going to say, hey, Michael, what are you doing? Or John, what are you doing? Let's talk about this. So, or I know your parents. I think that connection is missing sometimes in our community, and I think it's very important that we engage, as a community member and police officers, that we engage in dialogue and come together so that there's an understanding.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that. Ron, I want to bring you into the conversation. Tell us a little bit about the Neighborhood Square Watch and how it sees its role in helping facilitate that type of communication between neighbors and the police.
We're a group of neighbors that got together, and because our community is so diverse, we decided that we were no longer going to be held hostage or in fear of our community and what comes in and goes out of our community. And so we decided that we were going to make a stand. We weren't going to be, because a lot of the homeowners wanted to move out. And after we got to talking and discussing it, we said, it's not worth it. You put your whole life into building your property and building it up, and this is our community. And we got with the city services, and we started off as the Harrisburg Adopt-A-Block program. And that was founded by Barbara Allen. And then several years later, I took over, and I've been the community leader for the last 10 years, and our radius has spread. So it's not just a block. It's just like I have from 18th and Chestnut to 18th and Market, the south side of 1800 block of Market Street to 19th and Market, then 19th and Market to 19th and Chestnut, and then down through the 800 block of Zarker Street. So that's why I became the community leader instead of the captain of the block. So with that being said, we meet outside. And if there's any problems in the neighborhood or the community, I'll meet right there where the problem is. I always ask to have a police officer there so that, nothing gets out of hand. And normally we address problems right there. I believe in giving the person a second chance. I pass out flyers, welcome them into the community, and letting them know that, we live a certain way. And we're not going to let anybody come in and disrupt the way that our community is being ran. So, we have a whole bunch of kids. So, my thing is our children, the senior citizens, and the disabled. Because adjacent to us is Edison Village, the senior citizen side. And the seniors don't have a chance to go anywhere, so they sit out the front. So, I like to keep my eye on them and make sure that they're safe.
And how has the interaction been up to this point with the police?
Oh, great. We really don't have a problem because, like I said, I have cleanups, and we feed the children, and then I'm asking the police to be a part of, and that they want to have something to eat and share with the meal, and they get to talk to the kids, and the kids get to know the police, personally.
And do you think that in that area specifically, we're starting to see less of a divide between the police and the people?
Pretty much. The real problem that I have is when outsiders come in and buy the properties for just an investment, and they move different people in, and they don't tell them about our community, and hence I have to make flyers, welcome them to the neighborhood, and give them a listing of when the trash days are, and tell them that we meet from April to October outside. They're more than welcome to join in, and if they have any problems, I give them a cell phone number, and and that's the way that I try to get them incorporated into our community.
Okay. Amanda, let me turn to you. One of the things that I found most interesting in speaking to members of the community, and especially youth in Harrisburg, is the degree to which there really isn't a distinction between Harrisburg police and the police in Ferguson or the police in New York City. A lot of the conversation is influenced by the national conversation, and there really is a sort of perception. In other words, we may be doing things differently in Harrisburg, but nonetheless, that divide still exists. Can you talk a little bit about that in your own perspective?
Sure, and that's actually come up. So the YWCA has been working with our Community Responders Network to hold youth speak listening sessions throughout the community. So we've held 4 so far, and we've been asking youth in our community, how have your interactions been with police, positive and negative, and what do you want to see both the police and the community do to create better relationships? And part of what has come up is that even if youth, particularly younger kids, if they haven't personally had negative interactions with police, they're still fearful of Harrisburg police because of what they heard from Ferguson or from Staten Island or from Cleveland. And so there's definitely a connection there where certainly some have had negative experiences personally or seen or heard of something that's happened to a family member, but there's absolutely a lot of influence from what's happening nationally as well.
Tina, we had, on our first episode, we had 3 African-American men, all of different ages and experiences in Harrisburg, all relating interactions that they've had personally with the police, and all of them interpreting it through a racial lens. We then, on the next episode, had a young white Harrisburg police officer who is representative of the larger police force in the sense that we don't have enough diversity in our police force in Harrisburg, say that every interaction he has with the public, he tries not to view through the lens of race. And 2 almost completely different perspectives. One saying it has to be viewed through a racial lens, the other saying it can't be viewed through a racial lens. What do you make of that?
I really think, depending on your culture and what media perpetuates, for a person of color, that's how you have to view it, because that's what you're living, that's what you're seeing. As, a mother of a 17-year-old son who's 6'5" and 3-something pounds, I have to tell him, if you get pulled over, these are the things you must do. But also understanding that he understands what his rights are. And I think what happens is when you're trying to voice, officer, what did I do? My rights are this and that. Some police officers may see that as confrontational because they're an authority figure. So I think, in my opinion, that's the only way we can view it, because that's what we have seen and that's what has been perpetuated. Again, I always say, you have to walk in someone else's shoes. We just saw a video where there was an activist who went out with police officers and had to respond to certain situations. And I think the one he was shot and the other one he shot the perpetrator. But I think, we need to have an understanding of where they're coming from. And they need to have an understanding from the historical perspective of where we're coming from. We just watched the movie and had a talk back about Selma. I mean, there was real police brutality there, and that is something that has gone on for generations. And, it's again, these conversations and what we're doing as part of our mission is something to help us begin to heal and understand and know the different perspectives that folks are coming from.
I think that's really important. Ron, when the officer was here, he was talking about things as important as sort of body language and eye contact, and trying to explain that as a police officer, he can't always give direct eye contact because he's always required to sort of be aware of his surroundings. Sometimes he might stand in a slightly guarded position, which seems a little odd to a member of the general public, but that has to do with training and other things. And these are the sort of subtleties of policing which don't necessarily translate well in that type of interaction. So I guess the question is, what do we do to de-escalate the tension that may inherently be there when you have somebody that is viewing a situation from one perspective and somebody from another perspective? How do we help teach the skills to prevent that from escalating to a conflict?
Well, actually, I come from a pretty large family, and I have a lot of nephews, and some of them view the police as a threat because they're, so used to being intimidated by them. Even if they're just walking or if they're driving, like Ms. Nixon said, they just are. It's just been taught to them since they were coming up as kids, you know, that you have to be courteous if a police officer stops you or approaches you, and, you know, they get nervous just by seeing the cops, especially if, you know, and then I can't say that all of the police officers are bad, but then there are some that are very negative when they approach children, because I've seen it actually for myself at one point or another. And, you know, and I'll say, you know, to the young man, just pay attention and listen to what the officer says, and then you should be all right. I think that, you know, if somebody is there that can try to calm the situation down or talk to whichever party, and they'll be willing to listen to them, then it'll be de-escalated like that.
Yeah, it seems like if either side feels disrespected,
Yes.
right in that initial few seconds, whether it's the police officer who feels like they're being unnecessarily questioned for doing their job, or the community member who feels that they're being not treated with fairness. With fairness.
Yeah.
So,
And
what's your advice?
It happens to be too, you know, in the area that things occur in too, you know. Like all areas are not bad, and all areas aren't good, you know. And you know, the police officer has to be aware of his surroundings too, because even if he's in the wrong type of neighborhood, and now everybody starts to circle around to watch what's going on, because normally that's what happens once they see the cops pull over somebody. You know, everybody starts to crowd around, and then there's things that are being said in the heat of the moment, and then it gets, you know, escalates to a point where, you know, backup has to be called in, and then, you know, it has to be diffused. And I think that, you know, if rational heads would prevail, then, you know, it wouldn't be so hard for us to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, based on your experience at the Y and the conversations we've had, what do you think are some of the most common differences in perspective that are based in different racial perspectives?
I mean, I think going back to how you talked about looking through things with a racial lens or without a racial lens, I mean, I think we have to recognize that, you know, we live in a society where racism operates every day. And so whether we want to or not, we need to look through things with a racial lens. You know, people of color who live it every day, you have no choice. White people, we need to force ourselves to gain more awareness so we can see those things. And I think for you know, white male police officers, sometimes it's more difficult because, again, that's not your experience, but that's something that's essential, especially in that position of power, to be able to see through that lens.
Were there moments of epiphany from the Y conversations that might, you know, be instructive to viewers, where people said, "I never thought of it that way," or "Thank you for showing me, you know, that perspective"?
I think so. I remember in our last Let's Talk conversation last year, we had 2 police chiefs in the room, in addition to David, and, you know, many other folks who had experiences with police. And I think it was powerful to hear from both perspectives, people of color sharing, you know, these have been my experiences, and I think that did help those in law enforcement and other white people in the room to understand what that might be like, or not to fully understand, because we can't, but to help shift a perspective. And I know for me, you know, issues of policing and racial profiling weren't on my radar as much until the last several years, when, you know, meeting after meeting after meeting, there was always at least one story from a person of color in the room where they were pulled over, or the way that they were treated, or being followed home. And so, you know, that's, for me, it's not something that impacts me every day, but hearing the stories over and over again is something that has made me feel like this is a #1 priority in our work to eliminate racism.
After Ferguson took place, I was really upset. I was very emotional, like I said, with my son, and talking to him and telling him what he needed to do. But I also picked out 2 professional men, and I said, you know, what's your reaction if a police officer is behind you? And they're just like, you know, the same reaction. I fear for my life, because one, I'm thinking, you know, did I do anything? And, you know, how do I need to respond? And, you know, and speaking with them, they said we need to comply, and that's what we need to do. But sometimes complying doesn't always get us to where we want to be, depending on where that person is walked. He may have just pulled over, you know, or 15 other people and have been harassed by them. So I think in those situations, we both, we have to check ourselves and see where we are and make sure, we can diffuse and communicate and just have a basic understanding where each other are coming from.
Can you share with us some of the things, some of the advice that you've given your own son, and how to handle himself in a situation where maybe he feels that he is being targeted?
Well, the first thing I tell him to do is turn on the interior light and roll down all the car windows and put his hands on the steering wheel and don't move and follow whatever the officer is telling him to do at that point. Do not become argumentative. If there's a cell phone, he has me on speed dial, he can press that button and call me. But he is to comply and listen and not question and be respectful.
And even if an officer is being short or brusque and really has no grounds whatsoever in his mind, you'd still give him that advice, and then
Yes, I would rather for him to live than to start an argument and be shot. So if he felt that he was 100% right in what he was doing, we could take that up at a different time. But during that time where there's no one there to protect him, he needs to comply.
I think that's good advice, and I think it's also important for people to know that there is a time and a place, and there are avenues to address those concerns.
Right, absolutely.
We have
Absolutely.
a police chief and Thomas Carter here in the city who would take such concerns very seriously. I certainly would. City Council certainly would. There are avenues to do that. In the heat of the moment, any type of disagreement could escalate very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that, Ron?
Oh, I definitely agree with it. And that'd be some wise advice that, we tell all of our children, long as that, they can be respectful and not, because just like with my nephews too, they know I'll go to bat for them in a heartbeat, and especially if I know they're right. But I'd rather for them to live and me be able to go to bat for them and then have to go for them after I've buried them.
Absolutely.
Do you think there is a way that we could get more young people interested in entering a career in law enforcement? Because right now, sometimes it seems that the divisions are so strong that they've just automatically eliminated that career path.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts?
I think that, if we can do a thing from the community perspective, and and we could get them to enter in at the high school level and talk to the kids and tell them that there is nothing wrong with being a law enforcement officer. Matter of fact, it's a perfect career choice, and it might lead you to being something else, such as an attorney or a judge. If we can get them to see that you can go back into the community and give back, because I haven't always been an upstanding citizen. I've had my brushes with the law back in my past and stuff too, and to turn my life around and be able to give back to the community is the real blessing.
Okay, and we'll sort of wrap up with some final reflections now. Amanda, can you tell us what's going to be happening in the Y in the upcoming weeks and months, and if people are interested in continuing this conversation about race, what sort of resources can they find at the Y?
Absolutely. Well, we're always looking for people to participate in our Let's Talk, a conversation about race program, and we can come out to organizations to facilitate that, as well as hosting it at the Y. We have an active community responders network, which is a coalition of local leaders and concerned citizens focused on preventing and responding to incidents of bias in our community. And one of the exciting projects that we've been working on, this is a very timely conversation, is next week we are hosting our first To Protect and Serve in the 21st Century Building Bridges with Diverse Communities law enforcement training. And so we've opened this up to all of the police departments in Dauphin and Cumberland counties, and we're excited to have some of your officers coming. But this is a 2-day training that we're holding 3 times this spring that will really be focused on, number one, helping to raise cultural awareness. So we have different sessions looking at, how do you work effectively with Latino Hispanic communities, with immigrant and refugee communities, with African American communities, LGBT communities, all of the different types types of cultural communities we have in our area. And so bring some understanding and perspective from people from those communities to share with the police officers, as well as practical strategies and tips for working with them. So that's day one, and the day two focuses on some of the legal aspects. So we'll have a block of time looking at specifically at racial profiling and how do you build relationships of trust between police and the community. And so the U.S. Department of Justice will be here providing that presentation and best practices. And we'll also be getting some presentations from state government on state civil rights law, as well as federal civil rights law, and how do police officers, how does that interface with their work in upholding those laws, both statewide and nationally. So we're really excited about this initiative, and yeah, feel like it's very timely in light of all that's been happening.
Yeah, thank you for all of your work on that. Thank you for leading on this issue. Tina, why is that so important to the mission of the Y?
You know, our mission in eliminating racism and everything that we're doing in the community is really about bringing people together, starting the conversations, and educating and understanding so we can prevent incidents like Ferguson in New York from happening. I mean, that's our goal, is really to try to bring people together, to educate them, to prevent that. I just wanted to add on another exciting piece of work that we've been working on with Representative Kim and the ACLU is helping to develop, create a bill that will across Pennsylvania that will ask police departments to become accredited. And with that accreditation, there's certain standards that you have to meet, and there's certain trainings that you have to go through, so that you find that one, township police department is not doing something that another township police department is doing. So we're hoping with that legislation that we'll all be on the same page and speaking from the same book as it relates to racial profiling, training, cultural diversity, and those type of things. So, we are really, really committed to promoting freedom and dignity for all. And so I think it's important in the work that we do.
Yes, and I'm strongly supportive of that initiative as well, and it raises the city has been very active in talks of regionalizing our police forces and techniques, and we need to be mindful of the fact that this is truly a regional conversation, and not just one about Harrisburg. But hopefully Harrisburg will lead the way, and just as we're sort of leading the conversation now. Ron, do you have hopes for where your neighborhood watch group will go in the coming months? And
I'm hoping that there's so many community leaders throughout the city of Harrisburg, which I call unsung heroes. They have been out there on the front line for numerous years, like I have been. I'm hoping that we all can connect and and just bridge the gap with the whole city, because the city gets such a bad rep on social media that, it bothers me sometimes. It's disheartening because there's a lot of good communities in the city and that people that actually care. And, we're not getting that, when it comes to social media and the crime and all that kind of stuff. And I just hope that we can all just pull together and show that Harrisburg is a great city and a great place to live.
That's our goal as well. That's the administration's goal. That's Dave Botero's goal. That is a large part of what we're trying to do, and we thank you for all of your good work. And I'll see you when I'm next on Zarker Street. Thank you all for watching. That is our third episode now of Police and the People, the community response. We will see you again in a few more weeks, and our next episode is going to be on race in the media, and we look forward to continuing the conversation then.